My name is Gregory Hale. I'm 67 years old, a retired logistics consultant from Detroit, Michigan. For most of my life, I worked behind the scenes, managing warehouse systems, designing efficient delivery routes, and ensuring every moving piece of the operation clicked into place. I never made headlines, but I kept businesses running, and for a long time I thought I was doing the same for my family. This story begins on a chilly Thursday evening in late February, inside a newly renovated lakeside house in Grosse Pointe. The place belonged to my parents, Howard and Marlene Hale. I'd bought it for them 5 years ago, paid for everything from the down payment to the landscaping, but to anyone walking in, you'd think it had been theirs since forever. We were celebrating my mother's 70th birthday. The dining table gleamed with polished silverware and fine china. A caterer hovered in the kitchen, ready to serve roasted duck and squash risotto. My younger brother, Travis, poured red wine like he was hosting a political fundraiser. My sister Becca sat at the other end, tapping away on her phone between compliments about the house. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, sipping sparkling water. It had been 2 months since I lost my consulting position. Downsizing. The company shifted to digital-first operations, and I was offered early retirement without much ceremony. I hadn't told anyone yet, at least not the whole truth. But Travis knew. Somehow, he always knew things he shouldn't, and tonight he planned to use that. "So, Greg," he said, swirling his wine and flashing that self-satisfied smile. "How's the job hunt going?" Everyone turned to look at me. Forks paused mid-air. The air grew thick with a kind of polite curiosity, curious, but a little too eager. "I'm taking some time," I replied calmly, weighing a few options. Translation. Travis chuckled. "He's enjoying unemployment." The table burst into laughter. Except for me. My mother tried to interject with her usual light-hearted diplomacy. Now, Travis. Your brother's always been the responsible one. He deserves a break." Travis didn't let up. "Oh, I'm just saying. It must be nice to have the luxury of doing nothing. No job, no kids to raise, no mortgage." I didn't flinch. Just looked down at my napkin, folded perfectly in my lap. Then he added, "Honestly, Greg, what does it feel like? Being irrelevant?" That word hit differently. It wasn't the first time Travis had jabbed at me, but this one landed with surgical precision, and still, I said nothing. But my silence was not weakness. I was calculating, measuring the moment. The truth was, I had been covering my parents' expenses for over a decade. Their health insurance, their property taxes, the home renovations Becca bragged about on Instagram, the lease on Travis's SUV when he temporarily lost his startup funding 2 years ago. They thought the money came from a trust fund my grandfather left us. It didn't. It came from me. "Greg, don't be so sensitive," Becca chimed in, sipping her Chardonnay. "You've always been the behind-the-scenes type. Quiet, dependable, stable. Like a warm couch." "A couch," I forced a smile. "Tell you what," Travis added, raising his glass. "Let's toast to Greg. May he enjoy his peaceful little retirement and leave the heavy lifting to the rest of us." The glasses clinked. I didn't raise mine. I sat up a little straighter, looked directly at Travis. "How does it feel?" I said slowly. "To know that the irrelevant man you're mocking is the only reason you're still driving that Lexus." The table went dead silent. "What?" he said, laughing nervously. I turned to Becca. "Or that the warm couch paid for your social media management degree and your third failed business venture." Then to my parents. "And you, Mom and Dad? How exactly do you plan to keep this house, the insurance, and your little wine club, without the monthly deposits I've been sending for 11 years? Marlene dropped her fork. Howard looked like he'd seen a ghost. Travis leaned back in his chair. "You're bluffing." I reached into my coat and pulled out a manila folder. The same kind I'd used in every client audit since 1989. I set it down on the table. Inside were printouts, bank transfers, tuition receipts, property tax bills, every expense I'd quietly absorbed. Becca stood up. "This is a joke, right?" "It was," I said, "for the last 15 years. But I'm done laughing." I stood, buttoned my jacket, and looked around the stunned faces. "Enjoy dinner." I walked out into the cold Michigan air, leaving behind more than just duck and risotto. I left behind a family that had mistaken generosity for obligation and silence for permission. And that night, as I sat in my one-bedroom apartment across town, staring at the ceiling, I began to plan something I'd never done before. My own life. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds of my small apartment. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms and a kitchenette, but it was mine, paid in full. No marble countertops, No backyard deck, no illusion of grandeur, just a quiet place where I could hear my thoughts. Finally, without the background noise of expectation. I sat at the desk I'd bought decades ago at a yard sale. On it was the same calculator I'd used back in the 90-second its buttons faded, but still precise. I opened a fresh yellow legal pad, took a slow breath, and wrote 3 words across the top. What they owe. It wasn't out of spite. It was clarity. For too long, I'd blurred the lines between help and habit, between love and obligation. I opened my filing cabinet and started sorting. The first stack was labeled Mom and Dad. Health insurance premiums, $700 a month since 2013. Prescription costs, emergency dental work, a new furnace. The mortgage they refinanced under my name when Dad's credit tanked during the recession. My calculations came to $148,300. Next folder, Travis. 3 years ago, when his app development startup failed, he borrowed $30,000 to keep his condo. He never paid it back. Another $15,000 for the down payment on his luxury SUV. He'd promised to Venmo me back monthly. He never did. A couple of large payments for things he didn't ask for but expected: new suits, networking events, catered lunches for his investors. Loshitsi, Wubai. Then, Becca. Tuition for her marketing degree. Twice. She dropped out the first time, went back, changed majors, and graduated 6 years later. That bill alone was $64,000, plus the bakery she wanted to open during the cupcake boom. I funded it. It folded in 9 months. Rent for her Manhattan apartment during that phase, she couldn't breathe outside New York. Flights, laptops, broken phones. Ibai Lingba, Jobei. The numbers piled up like bricks. I took no joy in the math, but there was peace in the precision. I reached the final folder. GPH Consulting, Retirement Fund. My own, or what should have been. I had started contributing to it again just last year, after years of pulling out savings to cover family emergencies that were never mine. The account stood at $8,172. I closed my eyes. It wasn't just money. It was weekends I spent helping Dad paint the house instead of hiking in the Rockies like I used to. It was vacation brochures I never used. It was declining coffee dates with Nancy from choir because Becca's bakery needed another cash injection that week. It was me, slowly disappearing. At noon, I drove to the bank. Inside, I sat across from a woman named Angela. She had a warm smile and gray streaks in her hair that reminded me of my mother before the wine club and Botox. I need to cancel a series of automatic payments, I said. Of course, Mr. Hale. Do you have the account numbers? I handed her a typed list. 8 entries, each tied to a life I'd kept afloat without a life raft of my own. She glanced at it, her fingers flying across the keyboard. When she got to the payment marked Marlene and Howard Mortgage, she looked up. Family? Yes. She hesitated. This might cause some disruption. I know, I said, but they need to experience it. Within 30 minutes, the silent empire I'd built for them loan by loan, bill by bill, was officially dismantled. I walked out of the bank feeling lighter and heavier all at once, like I had dropped a weight and picked up another. That night, I made myself dinner. Not a fancy catered meal, not frozen lasagna from the freezer, just grilled salmon, asparagus, and a glass of iced tea. I ate it slowly, chewing deliberately, listening to the sounds of the apartment complex, the distant hum of a vacuum cleaner, footsteps in the hallway, my own heartbeat. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Dad. Then Becca. Then a text from Travis. What the hell did you do? The bank rejected the car payment. Call me, now. I turned off my phone. No one had checked on me in weeks. Not after I lost my job. Not when I quietly withdrew from the group chat. Not when I skipped Becca's latest product launch brunch. But now that the money stopped flowing, now I mattered. The next morning, a knock rattled my front door. I opened it to find Dad standing there in a puffy North Face jacket, one I'd bought him for Christmas 4 years ago. His hair was thinner, his eyes more tired than I remembered. He looked small. Gregory, he said softly, can we talk? I stepped aside and let him in. He sat on the couch and looked around like it was his first time seeing how I lived. I just came from the bank, he began. They said the mortgage payment bounced, and the heating bill. He looked down. We thought maybe it was a mistake. No mistake, I said, setting a mug of coffee in front of him. He stared at it, then back at me. Why now? Because I lost my job, Dad. 2 months ago. He blinked. You didn't say anything. No one asked. Silence. Then, you should have told us. Would it have mattered? He didn't answer. I leaned forward. Dad, do you know how much I've spent helping you and Mom since 2012? He shook his head. $148,300. He flinched, like the number had slapped him. I didn't mind, I added. At first, you needed help. I could help, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being help and became expectation. And when the money stopped, no one thought to ask if I was okay. They just got angry. He rubbed his face. We're not angry. We're scared. So was I said. For years. He looked at me for a long time, then said quietly, We never meant to take you for granted. I know. He stood up slowly. I'll talk to your mother. We'll figure something out. I'm not abandoning you, Dad. I'll help with the essentials. Food, medicine, emergencies. But the wine deliveries, the landscaping crew, the Christmas lights team, that's done. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. At the door, he paused. Gregory, we're proud of you. I'm sorry we never said it. The door clicked shut behind him, and for the first time in years, I realized I believed him. By the end of the week, the silence had broken. It began with a phone call from my former church friend, Pastor Calvin. He sounded hesitant, like someone stepping onto ice they weren't sure would hold. Greg, I heard something from Marlene. She called yesterday. Said things are tense. I smiled to myself. That's one way to put it. She mentioned financial trouble. Said you've stopped supporting the family. I did. He cleared his throat. Greg, are you okay? It was the first time in weeks someone had asked me that. I'm more than okay, I replied. For the first time in years, I'm breathing my own air. He was quiet for a beat. Just wanted to check in, that's all. We hung up. But by Sunday morning, the whispers had reached the community. At the farmer's market, I overheard two women discussing poor Marlene and Howard losing their mortgage help from their son. One of them clucked her tongue like I was some cold-hearted stranger. That afternoon, I got a message from Sharon, a neighbor from my old subdivision. Greg, I hope this isn't true, but Becca says you cut them all off, without warning. Are you okay? Why would you do something so extreme? It was hard not to laugh. Extreme? No one called it extreme when I helped pay Becca's Manhattan rent for 14 straight months because she needed space to grow creatively. But now that I was reclaiming space for myself, suddenly I was the villain? That night I opened my laptop. I typed for nearly 90 minutes carefully, honestly, without bitterness. I posted a single message on my personal Facebook account. For 15 years, I quietly supported my parents, siblings, and their children. I helped pay for their homes, education, insurance, and emergencies. I did it out of love, not obligation. But I've decided to step away. Not to punish, but to restore balance. I am not angry, I am not bitter, but I am finished funding lifestyles that deny their dependence on me while offering no gratitude in return. I'm still here for the essentials, for the children, but not for the entitlement. I hit post and went to bed. Monday morning, my inbox was full. Not of outrage, but of support. An old friend from high school wrote, Greg, thank you. I've been supporting my brother for years and never knew how to say no. A former coworker messaged, You're not alone. I cut off my daughter's credit card last year. Best decision I've made. She's finally learning. Even my accountant sent a simple note. Respect. About time. But not everyone was pleased. By lunchtime, Becca called. Her voice was tight, artificial. You made a public post about us? I made a post about my experience. People are asking questions. Aunt Rhonda called me crying. She said she didn't know we were struggling. You didn't tell her because you were too busy pretending to be successful. Becca's voice turned sharp. You're humiliating us. No, I said calmly. I'm correcting the record. A long silence. You don't understand what this is doing to Mom. She hasn't stopped crying. She didn't stop laughing when Travis called me irrelevant. Becca didn't reply. Before she hung up, she whispered, We needed you, and you just left. No, I said. I stopped carrying everything while you watched. Later that week, I went for groceries at the local co-op. As I walked past the freezer section, I heard someone call my name. It was Ernie, a retired mechanic who used to live next to my parents. He walked up, shook my hand, and said quietly, I read your post. Took guts. A lot of us older guys have been doing the same thing, bailing everyone out. He looked over his shoulder. My son called me selfish when I stopped paying his rent last year. Said I was heartless. I nodded. What did you say? Told him. My wallet isn't your backup plan. We laughed. Two tired men who had finally learned to stop apologizing for drawing a boundary. By Friday, things escalated. Travis showed up at my apartment. He knocked hard 3 times, then a pause, then 3 more. Always the dramatist. When I opened the door, he stepped in without waiting. You have no idea what you've done, he started. I have every idea, I said. He pointed a finger. Becca's bakery clients canceled their spring orders, said the optics were bad. Optics? I almost laughed. She's not a celebrity. She's a woman who lied about where the money came from. His eyes narrowed. You're not being fair. And for 15 years, what about fairness then? He didn't answer. I crossed the room and picked up a blue folder from my desk. I handed it to him. He opened it and froze. Inside was a full breakdown of every payment made in his name. The SUV lease, the temporary condo rent, the startup seed money, a total of $67,500. You think I kept track? I asked. I didn't until now, because this isn't about debt, it's about recognition. He swallowed hard. So what? You want me to pay it back? No, I said. I want you to realize it was never yours to claim. He looked up at me, eyes reddening. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something that might have been shame. He walked toward the door, folder still in hand. Right before he stepped out, he said, You're ruining this family. I met his eyes. No, Travis, I'm finally saving it. That night, I sat in the dark, listening to the clock tick. For years, I feared this fallout believed that without me holding the financial threads, everything would unravel. But in the quiet, I realized something. Sometimes a house needs to fall to be rebuilt properly. And perhaps, just perhaps, the foundation I'd tried to build in secret was never as solid as I thought. By Saturday morning, I knew something had shifted. The tension I'd expected murmured phone calls. Pointed messages had escalated into something sharper. My mother called 3 times before breakfast. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed her to sit with the silence the same way I had for years. Around noon, I decided to drive past my parents' house. I hadn't been there since the birthday dinner. Their lawn, once perfectly trimmed by the landscaping crew I paid for, was already starting to look uneven. A stack of unopened mail sat by the front door. For a brief second, guilt pricked at me. Then I saw Travis's Lexus parked in the driveway, and the feeling evaporated. That afternoon, Becca posted something on social media. A photo of my mother sitting by the window, eyes red, with the caption, When family abandons you, you learn who truly cares. Some people only love when they're in control. It didn't take long before friends and neighbors flooded the comments with sympathy. So sorry, Becca. Sending love. What happened? Do you need anything? Families can be complicated. Stay strong. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth had a way of finding daylight. But then, a private message popped up. It was from a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in months, Mrs. Patterson. Greg, is it true you've been paying for everything all these years? Because if that's the case, Becca's post is unfair. I stared at her message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Finally, I typed, yes, for 15 years, nearly $350,000 in total. I'm done being invisible. She read it instantly and replied with just 3 words. Good for you. That evening, the storm arrived. I heard the knock before I even reached the door. A quick, frantic rhythm. When I opened it, my mother stood there, flanked by my father and Travis. Her cheeks were flushed, and she was holding a crumpled envelope like a white flag. Gregory, she said, her voice trembling, this isn't you. You're not the kind of man who turns his back on family. I'm not turning my back, I said calmly. I'm stepping out of the shadows. Travis scoffed. Shadows? You think you're some kind of martyr? We never asked you to. I cut him off. Number you just assumed I'd always pay. Dad raised his hands as if to keep the peace. Let's sit. Talk like adults. We moved into my small living room. The contrast to their polished house was striking second-hand furniture. Simple decor. Nothing showy. My mother looked around like she'd stepped into another planet. I brought this, she said, sliding the envelope across the table. It's a list of our monthly bills. Maybe if you just help with the essentials. I pushed it back. I've already decided what I'll cover. Food, medicine, emergencies. That's it. Greg, she pleaded. You can't just cut us off like this. We'll lose the house. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Then sell the house. Move into something smaller. You don't need a 5-bedroom place with wine cellars and a lake view. Her lips trembled. Travis slammed his hand on the table. This is pathetic. You're holding us hostage because your ego got bruised at dinner. My voice was steady, cold. No, Travis. I'm finally letting go because I've carried this family like a mule while you drank the wine and laughed. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my father's stoic, quiet Howard cleared his throat. He's right, he said softly. Everyone turned to him. What? My mother asked. He's right, Dad repeated. We've leaned on him too long. I should have seen it. Marlene stared at him like he'd betrayed her. Howard, you can't possibly. Enough, he said, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard. I watched my son pay for everything while we sat comfortably pretending it was all ours. It's time we stand on our own feet. Travis blinked, stunning. I looked at my father, and for the first time in years, I saw him clearly not as the man I'd been bailing out, but as the man who once taught me to ride a bike, who worked double shifts to buy me my first car. He wasn't the enemy. He was just tired, like me. They left soon after. No hugs, no warm goodbyes, just a quiet exit and the sound of my mother's muffled sobs as they walked to Travis's Lexus. I sat there long after the door closed. The house was still. The kind of stillness that follows an earthquake when the dust settles but the damage is plain. On Sunday morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a long drive by myself, through winding roads that cut through patches of bare trees and frozen lakes. For once, I wasn't heading to anyone's house to fix their problems. I was just driving. I ended up at Belle Isle Park, where I used to bring my nieces and nephews to watch fireworks on the 4th of July. I parked, walked to the river's edge, and stood there as the cold wind whipped across my face. And for the first time, I felt free. But I also felt something else, an ache. The kind of ache that comes when you realize freedom has a cost. When I got home that evening, a voicemail was waiting. It was Becca, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Greg, I think I get it now. I don't know how we let it get this bad. But if you can, could we talk? Just you and me? Becca arrived the next afternoon. No entourage, no filters, no rehearsed lines. She wore a simple gray sweater and jeans clothes I hadn't seen her wear since her brand consultant phase began. She held no designer purse, just a folded notebook clutched against her chest like a shield. I opened the door and gestured for her to come in. She stepped in slowly, glancing around like it was her first time really seeing where I lived. It's quiet here, she said. It usually is. We sat at my small kitchen table. I poured 2 cups of tea. She stared into hers like she was searching for the right words. I don't know where to start, she said finally. Try the truth. She exhaled, her voice shaking. I think I got used to thinking of you as the strong one, the one who always fixed everything. I forgot you were human. You didn't forget, I said calmly. You ignored it. She winced but didn't argue. I looked over the numbers, she added, reaching into her notebook and unfolding a paper. What you've paid for me. School, rent, the bakery. It's more than I realized. I kept saying you were helping, but you were funding my entire adult life. I stayed quiet, and I never said thank you. Not really. No, you didn't. She swallowed hard. So, thank you. For all of it. I didn't earn it. I didn't even deserve it. But I got it. And now, I want to do better. I looked at her. Why now? She hesitated. Because for the first time in my life, I'm scared. And not because the money's gone, but because I don't know who I am without it. The room was still. That's a good place to start, I said. She blinked, confused. What? When you don't know who you are, that's when you finally start figuring it out. When the distractions are gone, when the handouts stop, when no one's coming to rescue you, that's when the real work begins. She nodded slowly, eyes welling with tears. We talked for 2 hours. Not about bills, not about blame, about truth, about her failed business and what she'd learned, about the guilt she'd buried, about the shame of performing success for strangers while depending on me behind the curtain. When she left, she hugged me. Not a stiff, you're still mad at me, hug, but the kind that said she understood something now. Maybe not everything, but something. The next morning, I found an envelope slid under my door. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dear Greg, I don't have the words to undo 15 years of silence, but I want you to know if I could go back, I'd say thank you every single time. For the rent, the tuition, the second chance. This isn't about money. It's about love. You showed it when we didn't. You gave without asking. and we took without seeing. I want to see now. Love, Becca. I placed it inside the folder marked Family. Not under expenses, but in a new section I hadn't created before. Reconciliations. That afternoon, Travis called. For the first time, he didn't yell. Becca told me what she said to you. And, I think, I owe you a few things too. Such as? He paused. A conversation, man to man. I'm listening. He cleared his throat. When I called you irrelevant, it wasn't about you. It was about me. I've never earned half of what you gave, and deep down, I knew it. Mocking you was the only way I could feel taller. That sounds a lot like your startup pitches, I said dryly. To my surprise, he chuckled. Fair. We were quiet for a beat. Then he said, I'm selling the Lexus. You should. We're moving into a rental, 2 bedrooms, smaller place, but manageable. Good. I don't expect you to clap, he added. Just wanted you to know. I don't clap for what should have been happening all along. Yeah, he said. But maybe, in a few months, you'll nod. I didn't promise, but I didn't hang up either. Later that week, I got a knock at the door. It was my mother. She wasn't crying this time. She wasn't holding bills. She brought pie. From scratch. She looked older, smaller, but more real than I'd seen in years. I heard Becca came over, she said. She did. And Travis? He called. She nodded. Then her voice softened. So, is there a place for me in this new version of the family? That depends, I said. On what? On whether you see me now. Not as the wallet, not as the fallback, but as your son. She teared up. I do, she whispered. And I'm sorry it took losing you to realize what we had. We shared the pie in silence. The air was different now. Not fully healed, but healing. And in that quiet kitchen, for the first time in years, I heard what gratitude actually sounded like. Not through words, but through humility. Sunday came with a surprising calm. Not the kind of calm that comes before a storm, but the kind that follows the first honest conversation after years of pretending. My mother had left behind a note with the pie, handwritten in the careful cursive I remembered from childhood. Gregory, your father and I talked last night. I won't pretend this is easy for us, but I want to try. We want to see you, not just what you give. If you're willing, we'd like to have dinner with you next week. Just dinner. No requests. No expectations. Just us. Love, Mom. I folded the note and placed it in the same folder where I kept Becca's letter. The reconciliations folder was growing. That evening, I decided it was time to set terms. Real terms. Not assumptions, not quiet compliance, but spoken agreements. I wrote out a letter, a new kind of contract. Not legal, not binding, but foundational. To my family, for 15 years I gave without limit, out of love, out of duty, out of grief, after losing Martha. But that era is over. Here is what I am still willing to give. Direct support for Tommy and Emma's education. Coverage of medical expenses for both children. A small monthly grocery stipend for emergencies. Emotional presence when asked and appreciated. Here is what I will not give. Mortgage payments. Car leases. Business investments. Funding adult lifestyles above your means. Asterisk. These are not punishments. These are boundaries. If respected, I promise they will help us rebuild something better. With respect, Gregory. I printed 5 copies and mailed them one to each household. No drama, no confrontation, just facts. The next week, I met with Dad at Belle Isle. He brought a thermos of black coffee and 2 camp chairs. We sat near the water, watching the sun shimmer off the Detroit River. He pulled the letter from his coat. I read it 3 times, he said. And? I wish I'd written something like this to my father. I looked at him, startled. He sipped his coffee. Your grandfather paid for everything after I flunked out of college, and I told myself I'd pay him back. I never did. When he died, I realized I never even said thank you. He looked at me now with a different kind of sorrow, one I hadn't seen in him before. Not just regret, but recognition. You broke the pattern, Greg, he said. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. 3 days later, Becca posted again. But this time, not a vague meme or a guilt-ridden plea for sympathy. This time, it was a photo of me and the grandkids from 2 summers ago, Tommy on my shoulders, Emma wrapped around my arm, all of us laughing beside a lemonade stand. Her caption read, I used to think success was money, titles, vacations, but I forgot where real legacy lives. Thank you, Greg, for carrying us, even when we didn't know we were being carried. I see it now. We all do. It received over 300 comments. Most were kind. A few were confused. Some asked what had happened. She didn't answer, because for once the truth was enough. That Friday, the whole family came to my apartment for dinner. No catered meal. No white linen napkins. Just homemade chili, cornbread, and a few folding chairs pulled from the closet. Tommy helped set the table. Emma brought her sketchbook to show me a drawing she'd made, a stick figure grandpa holding an umbrella over a house. I made it for you, she said, because you were the roof when it rained. I blinked hard. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Becca sat on the couch, quietly holding her tea. Travis was subdued, but polite. No jabs, no wine. And my mother asked if she could help with the dishes after dinner. I nearly dropped a plate. After everyone left, I stood at the sink, warm water running over my hands, and thought about what had changed. Not everything, but enough. I hadn't fixed them, but I had reset the balance. They still had to earn their own stability. But now, they were willing to try. And as I dried my hands and walked to my window, I realized something simple and profound. This is what family looks like when respect comes first. It started with a postcard. I found it at the bottom of an old drawer, tucked between a forgotten hiking map and a brochure for a river cruise through southern France. The card had a photo of Tuscany golden fields, winding roads, a vineyard bathed in soft sunlight. On the back, in Martha's handwriting, were 3 words: "Someday, my love." I sat on the edge of my bed, holding that postcard like it was something sacred. It was dated July 2007, 3 months before her diagnosis. Someday. That word had sat quietly in my soul for years, waiting. But I always had an excuse. Caroline's bills, Travis's lease, Becca's new project, my parents' medical deductibles. Every time I looked at that card, I told myself, later, when they're stable. They never were, and I never went. But now, maybe I could. That Monday, I called my financial advisor, Paul. He was the only one who had ever dared question my generosity. "You're serious?" he asked when I told him I was thinking of traveling. "Dead serious." "Well," he said, flipping through the numbers, "you've been living on a third of what you could afford for the past decade. Between the retirement savings and what we're now redirecting monthly, yeah, Greg, you've got room." I laughed. It felt foreign in my mouth, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in a long time. That week, I dusted off an old suitcase. Not the large one, the medium roller that Martha had bought before our anniversary trip that never happened. I started small. A weekend up north in Traverse City. Crisp air, cherry pie. A lakeside cabin where I read until midnight and fell asleep to the sound of waves instead of complaints. The following month, I booked a photography class at a wildlife sanctuary outside Chicago. I'd always wanted to learn how to use my camera properly. The instructor, a woman named Lena, was my age with a soft laugh and sharper wit. We talked after class, about birds, about retirement, about quiet things. We exchanged numbers, not with urgency, but with the ease of people who have nothing left to prove. Back home, I began rearranging my study. I took down framed receipts and replaced them with framed photographs: Tommy's soccer match, Emma's recital, Martha holding a bouquet from our garden in 2004. I bought a corkboard. On it, I pinned a list titled, "Things I Postponed." Take cooking class, Italian. See Yellowstone. Learn piano again. Return to Belle Isle, this time with someone. Write letters to Martha. Get a passport renewal. Tuscany. Fall? It wasn't a bucket list. It was a recovery list. A life not missed but paused. And finally resumed. One Saturday morning, I was in the middle of watching a cooking tutorial on handmade pasta when Becca called. "Hey," she said cautiously. "I was wondering, would you be okay watching the kids next Friday? Just for a few hours?" I smiled. "Absolutely." She paused. "Do you need me to leave money for pizza?" "Number. But thank you for asking." It was such a small thing, but it meant everything. That Friday night, Emma fell asleep on the couch watching a documentary about sea otters. Tommy beat me in 3 rounds of checkers, legitimately this time. He pumped his fist like a champion. "Grandpa," he said as I tucked him into bed, "are you still mad at Mom and Dad?" I sat beside him. Number. But I needed to remind them of something important. "What's that?" "That love isn't something we take. It's something we see and return." He nodded, eyes sleepy. "I'm glad you're not invisible anymore." I kissed his forehead. "Me too." That night, I sat on my porch and opened Martha's old recipe book. Inside the back cover, in her handwriting, was a quote. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Refill yourself first, then serve others with joy, not duty. I hadn't served with joy in years. But now, I was starting to taste it again. In quiet walks, in red wine with dinner, in messages from Lena, in nights without obligations, and in mornings where the first thought was not, what do they need? But instead, what do I want to do today? 3 months later, I stood in the front yard of a modest house on Chandler Street, a small craftsman-style home with a porch swing and flower boxes that needed a little work. The lawn was uneven, the roof could use some patching, but it was theirs. Becca and Travis had downsized, sold the BMW, canceled the meal deliveries, moved into a place they could afford on their own salaries. And when I say afford, I mean actually afford without my name silently underwriting their lives. I watched from my car as Tommy carried a box of books up the front steps. Emma skipped behind him, holding a houseplant with both hands like it was a treasure. Becca looked up and saw me. She smiled, not the Instagram smile, but the real one I remembered from her teenage years. She waved me over. Inside, the new house smelled like paint and optimism. Don't mind the mess, she said, brushing dust off a folding chair. We're still settling in. I like it, I said. It feels honest. She paused. That's what we're trying to build. Travis walked in, wiping sweat from his brow. Greg, he said, nodding. No tension, no sarcasm, just respect. He offered me a lemonade. You two okay? I asked. Becca looked at Travis. He smiled faintly. We fight less now, he said. Turns out living within your means teaches you to appreciate what you have. Becca added, and to stop blaming others when things fall apart. I walked through the small hallway and peeked into Emma's new room. On the wall, taped neatly, was her drawing of me with the umbrella. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Dad, Becca said gently behind me. We kept that up to remind the kids and ourselves what you did for us, what you taught us. I didn't teach you, I said softly. Life did. I just stopped cushioning the fall. She nodded. And thank you for that, she added, even when it hurt. That evening, they invited me to stay for dinner. Not a fancy spread, just spaghetti, garlic bread, and a salad from a bag. And it was perfect. Tommy passed the cheese. Emma asked about my photography class. Travis told me he was training to become a regional sales lead again, this time with his own goals, not ones built on borrowed confidence. Becca made a toast. To family, she said. Not the kind that gives without limits, but the kind that grows, even through hard seasons. We clinked glasses. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I drove home and passed the house I used to pay for. The one with the wine cellar, manicured lawn, and stone fountain out front. The for sale sign still stood there. Empty now. Cold. I didn't stop. Back in my apartment, I lit a candle and sat at my desk. I pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote one more entry for the reconciliations folder. They stood on their own today. Not perfectly, not without wobble, but proudly. And this time, they didn't look back for my permission. They only looked forward. I folded the paper, added it to the folder, and slid it back into the drawer. Then I opened my laptop. Lena had sent a message. So, Tuscany this fall? Or do we wait for spring wildflowers in Provence? I smiled. And for the first time in years, I wrote back with no hesitation. Let's chase the sun before the leaves fall. As I closed the computer, I looked around my small apartment, my space, my life, and realized that in losing control, I had gained peace. In drawing lines, I had drawn respect. And in letting go of who I was forced to be, I'd finally become who I was meant to be. Not a resquare, not a martyr, not a walking checkbook. Just Gregory Hale, a man who gave, a man who paused, and a man who at last chose himself.